Choice is one of the most important concepts that you can get. We're going to be talking about the laws of the universe. One of the laws is the law of polarity. There'd be no inside to the room you're in if there wasn't an outside. You couldn't have a right side of your body without a left, or a top without a bottom, or a front without a back. You can't have a bad without a good. See, the truth is we make it bad or good. Ralph Waldo Trine, In Tune with the Infinite, a great book, he said, nothing is good or bad except our thinking will make it so. Well, if everything's both good and bad, and we bring it together, what's right in the center? If everything here is bad, everything here is good, what's in the center? Just is. Everything just is. You choose whether you're going to look at the downside or the upside. Michael Beckwith gave me a marvelous concept. He said, it doesn't matter what happens in your life. Doesn't matter what happens. You can't control the circumstance, but you can certainly control how you deal with them. He said, when anything happens, step number one, it is what it is, accept it. It's either going to control you or you're going to control it. That's a choice. Step number two, harvest the good. Isn't that a neat word, harvest? Harvest the good. There's good and bad in everything, just harvest the good. Step number three, forgive all the rest. Forgive means let go of completely. It's a choice. Yet if you let go of the bad, the good seems to grow. You and I have a choice. It may be a difficult choice sometimes if you're dealing with a particular difficult individual or a particularly difficult circumstance. Nevertheless, we've got the power within us to do it. So as you go through the day, doesn't matter what anybody says, doesn't matter what happens, you have a choice to say, that's good. W. Clement Stone became the wealthiest man in the United States of America by 1970 because he always said, that's good. Doesn't matter what it was. He'd say, that's good. And then he'd look for the good. That's a good choice for you to make, and make it all day long. So your word for the day is choice, choice, choice. And only you have the ability to do that. And if you choose right, you are going to get results that stick.
In any given moment in time, you'll be slightly above your standard, slightly below your standard. But that standard, it really dictates sort of where you end up over the long term. So there's many people out there, for instance, that they have a standard, they need to make $200,000 a year. So they make $200,000 a year. Because what happens when they go over that, they back off. Other people have a standard, they make $2 million a year. I won't settle until I make $2 million, right? Those people end up at $2 million. So the idea is that to first realize, what is my standard, and does my standard serve my outcome? Is my standard too low? Is my standard unreasonable? If there's any conflict, there's dissonance between where you want to go and what your actual standard is, then you need to either raise your standard, or sometimes even it could be lowering a financial standard if it's corrupting the rest of your life. Right. But typically what we find is that people have financial standards that are really not serving. They're a little bit low, and they can raise them up.
The beautiful part about goals and understanding it is goals are not to get. Goals is not, you don't set goals for acquisition. You set goals to grow. You set goals to reach inside and stretch and go where you've never been. You set goals to take you to a place you've never gone before. And you grow as a human being, and you know something, you never go back.
You're going to have lasting change in anything. You're really talking about just raising your standards. I mean, I always tell people, if you want to know how to change your life, I give it to you in 3 words, boring as it sounds: raise your standards. And what does that mean? Corny as it sounds. Raise your standards. Oh, thank you for the breakthrough thought, Tony. I'm glad I wasted my time watching this little email with you. But think about it. Lasting change is different than a goal. You don't always get your goals, but you always get your standards. Maybe it'll help you is to think about it this way. I try to explain standards to people with a different set of words. Think of it as everybody in life gets their musts. They don't get their shoulds. Like, think about it. Most people have a list of shoulds, don't they? Don't you have a list of the shoulds, things you should do, you should follow through on? I should lose some weight, I should work out more, I should make more calls, I should respond more rapidly to my email, whatever, I should get into the office earlier, I should be, more confident. Whatever your should list is, people love to have their should list be met, but it's kind of like New Year's resolutions. If it does, it's really exciting, but if it doesn't, which is most of the time, it's a little disappointing, but you kind of know it's not going to happen. But when you decide something is a must for you, an absolute must, when you cut off any possibility, you say, I'm gonna find the way or I'm gonna make the way. Human beings, when they resolve things, when they make a real resolution inside themselves, which is they raise the standard and they make it a must, they find the way. Think about it in your own life. Haven't you had some area of your life where you raised your standard and your life has never been the same? Maybe at one time in your life you smoked cigarettes, or you did something and you did it for years and you kept trying to change it, and kept telling yourself, I should. And then one day something happened. Something just clicked you over. Something took you over that kind of tipping point. And inside yourself, you said, no more. And it was a very, very different experience, wasn't it? Something inside of you shifted. And what was a should became a must, and you've never gone back. Is there an area like that in your life you can think of? Again, did you ever smoke cigarettes? Did you ever eat a certain way, drink a certain form of alcohol, and then finally say no more, and you just don't go back? And notice this, it doesn't really take any willpower anymore. Because somewhere when we make this click, when we make something a must, we attach ourselves to it. It becomes part of our identity. And one thing I've learned in the last, 33 years of working with people from now over 100 countries, 4 million people, is human beings absolutely follow through on who they believe they are. If you said to me, well, I'm really gonna work hard to stop smoking, but I've been a smoker my whole life and I am a smoker, I know your days are numbered. You're gonna be back smoking cigarettes again, because we all act consistent with who we believe we are. I tell people the strongest force in the whole human personality is this need to stay consistent with how we define ourselves. If you define yourself as somebody who is really conservative, you're not gonna be crazy and act nuts unless you're really drunk or something, and then you can say it's the alcohol, when it's really just you finally getting permission to be yourself. The alcohol is your excuse. If you're a really crazy person, you act crazy, outrageous, playful. You don't act conservative because that's not who you are. Very often people say, well, I can't do that. I'm not that kind of person. And I always say to people, really, when did you define yourself? I mean, really, how many years ago did you come up with what you could and couldn't do in your life? How many years ago? Most people, if they really look at how they're living their life today, it's based on a set of standards, a set of beliefs that they made choices about 10, 20, 30 or more years ago. I mean, very often we made decisions in our youth or very young about what to believe, about what we were capable of, about who we are as a person, and that becomes the glass ceiling, if you will, that controls us. There's a corny metaphor, but it's true. I remember one time I was with my family at the circus, and there was a person there, and they had this big, giant elephant. And you look at this elephant, and they take this little rope, put it around the elephant's neck, and they drive this stake into the ground. And I mean, you look at this, and you know that elephant could rip down the entire tent with almost no effort. And yet, the elephant doesn't struggle, doesn't try. Why? Because the elephant's conditioned. And they take that elephant and condition the elephant when it's a baby elephant. That's how they train him. When it's a little baby elephant and it doesn't have the power yet, they put a big rope around it and they drive this huge stake in the ground, and the elephant fights and fights and fights. And one day, finally, that elephant decides, I'm not capable of pulling this out. And once that becomes the definition of an identity of anyone, an elephant in this case, they don't even try anymore. It's just who I am, that's how it is, that's just the way it is in my life. I'd like to ask you to take a look at any place you've got a limitation and ask yourself, when did I decide to accept that limitation? And you may not even see it as a limitation. You might see it as just, that's who I am. But so often in our lives, we've adapted to be a certain way so that we don't fail or so that people will like us or respect us, but it's not necessarily who we are. Joy comes when you're spontaneous. It's really hard to be truly happy when you're not being yourself. And most of us have no clue who we are. And so a big part of my work, if you've ever been to an event, you know, is to get people to do things spontaneously without thinking, because that's when the real you shows up. That's when the energy comes alive. And when you do that, when you start to connect to your true nature, suddenly there's energy available for you to set a higher standard for what you want in your life. That's what this is really all about.
People don't realize how much of success is not an accident. It's about people that have these extraordinary skills and they take action.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer in learning skills. Like you read my first book, right?
Yes.
Well, when I first tried to write, I was a terrible writer. I taught myself to write by...
Wolf of Wall Street was your first book?
Yes. I never wrote before. When I first tried to write, I was a terrible writer.
How many copies have sold?
Millions of copies, right?
Wow.
So how did I write Wolf of Wall Street myself without a ghostwriter? I picked up a book called Bonfire of the Vanities and started reading it. Tom Wolfe, I'm sure you've read it, right?
Yeah.
And as soon as I started reading it, I'm like, oh my God, this guy's the best writer in the world. I want to write like that. And I used his book like a textbook. I took out my highlighter and I broke down his strategy for writing, and I practiced before I wrote the book. I said, let me first teach myself the skill to write like Tom Wolfe. And that's what I did. I spent about 6 or 7 months with 18 hours a day studying.
Really?
Oh yeah, yes, to the point where I could recite the whole book verbatim. Okay, seriously. So the point is that I learned how to introduce characters.
It's almost like it was a mentor. The book was your mentor.
And my model.
Yeah.
And then I wrapped it up with Hunter S. Thompson because I figured it made sense because of the drug use, right? So but I used those people. And then when I was reviewing the New York Times, they said the book sounds like Hunter S. Thompson and Tom Wolfe. So it was amazing, right? That I accomplished my mission and turned myself into a writer.
Michael Gerber, the guy that wrote the E-Myth, talks about why so many young businesses fail. And one of the things he says is most people are not really entrepreneurs, but they think that's what they should be. They think that's the sexy thing, that's the most attractive thing, that's the best answer. And what I say to you is, you gotta separate the vehicle from the outcome. What is it that's gonna truly fulfill you? What is it that's gonna give you that extraordinary life? What's gonna make things magnificent on your terms, not somebody else's terms, not your father, your mother, your background? What is that really? Separate the vehicle, because there's many ways to get to that vehicle. But I'm saying, sometimes you gotta reevaluate what's gonna really make you fulfilled. What is your gift? Are you an artist? Are you the talent that can produce something no one else produces as a skill or a product or a service or some impact? Are you incredibly good at management? You really know how to manage or lead people? Are you an extraordinary entrepreneur that can take that gigantic gut load of risk and can create the vision and attract the talent that you need and the managers and leaders? You may have all three abilities, but which one really fulfills you the most is going to be the critical question. Because we tend to want to do them all, especially in a room like this, because you're all overachievers, right? Me too. And you say, well, I can do all these. Yes, you can, but what will it do to your quality of life? See, again, the secret's going to be this. What is an extraordinary life on your terms today?
Steel magnate Andrew Carnegie, when asked the formula for success, answered, put all your eggs in one basket, then watch the basket. Let's be frankly realistic. Who gets laid off work during an economic slump? Well, what gets thrown over the side when a ship is in danger of going down? Everything not absolutely vital to the operation of the craft and the safety of its passengers. And it's the same with a business or any other organization. With a corporation, its main purpose is to remain in business forever. As long as it remains in business, it can provide a needed product or service, protect the investment of those who have faith in it, and provide jobs for those who are vital to its continuity of operation. It's the duty of management to protect the firm and the people who depend upon it, just as it's the captain's duty to do everything in his power to keep his ship sailing. All a person needs to do is to make certain that he or she is a vital part of his business or organization. Those who insist on remaining spare gear must expect to be jettisoned when things get too rough for safety. Nobody, particularly the captain, likes to see cargo thrown over the side, but if it'll help save the ship, there's simply nothing else to do. That's why people are laid off. It has nothing to do with management and labor relations or personalities, and in the long run, it's best for everyone, since once smooth sailing has again been reached, additional employment can be made available. So each of us must decide whether we want to be part of the cargo or a member of the crew.
We have so many rules in life about everything. I say break the rules, not the law, but break the rules. My wife has a t-shirt that says, well-behaved women rarely make history. Well, I don't want to burst her bubble, but the same is true with men. It is impossible to be a maverick or a true original if you're too well-behaved and don't want to break the rules. You have to think outside the box. That's what I believe. After all, what is the point of being on this earth if all you want to do is be liked by everyone and avoid trouble? The only way that I ever got any place was by breaking some of the rules. After all, I remember that after I was finished with my bodybuilding career, I wanted to get into acting and I wanted to be a star in films. You can imagine what the agents said when I went to meet all those agents. Everyone had the same line that it can't be done. The rules are different here. Just look at your body. You have this huge, monstrous body, overly developed, that doesn't fit into the movies. You don't understand. This was 20 years ago, the Hercules movies. Now there's the little guys that are in. Dustin Hoffman, Woody Allen, Jack Nicholson, before he gained weight, of course, that is. But anyway, those are the guys that were in. And the agent also complained about my accent. He says, no one ever became a star with an accent like that, especially not with a German accent. And yes, I can imagine with your name, Arnold Schwarzenschnitzel or whatever the name is, on a billboard. Yeah, that's going to draw a lot of tickets and sell a lot of tickets. Yeah, right. So this is the kind of negative attitude they had, but I didn't listen to those rules. Even though they were very nice and they said, look, we can get you some bit parts. We can get you to be playing a wrestler or a bouncer. Oh, maybe with your German accent, we can get you to be a Nazi officer in Hogan's Heroes or something like that. But, I didn't listen to orders. These were their rules, not my rules. I was convinced I could do it, that if I worked as hard as I did in bodybuilding, 5 hours a day, and I started getting to work, I started taking acting classes, took English classes, took speech classes, dialogue classes, accent removal classes I even took. I remember running around, a fine wine grows on a vine. You see, because Germans had difficulties with the F and the W and the V. So fine wine grows on a vine. I know what some of you now say is I hope that Arnold got his money back. But let me tell you something. I had a good time doing those things and it really helped me. And finally I broke through. And I started getting the first parts in TV, Streets of San Francisco. Lucille Ball hired me. I made Pumping Iron, Stay Hungry. And then I got the big break in Conan the Barbarian. And there the director said, if we wouldn't have Schwarzenegger, we would have to build one. Now think about that. And then when I did Terminator, I'll be back. Became one of the most famous lines in movie history, all because of my crazy accent. Now think about it. The things that the agent said will be totally a detriment and will be impossible for me to get a job, all of a sudden became an asset for me. All of those things, my accent, my body and everything. So it just shows you never listen that you can't do something. And you have to work your way up, of course, run for something else first. I mean, it was the same when I ran for governor. The same lines that you have to work your way up, it can't be done. And then, of course, I ran for governor, and the rest, of course, is history. They said you have to start with a small job as mayor, and then as assemblyman, and then as lieutenant governor, and then as governor. And they said, that's the way it works in a political career. I said, I'm not interested in a political career. I want to be a public servant. I want to fix California's problems and bring people together and bring the parties together. So, like I said, I decided to run. I didn't pay attention to the rules, and I made it, and the rest is history.
What age should one give up on their dream? Never. Goethe said this, Henry Ford said this, Rockefeller said this. You're only as young or as old as your dreams. And as long as you still have dreams and visions and goals, they keep you young. It's the most amazing darn thing. One of the great stories is the story of Kentucky Fried Chicken. Once upon a time, there was a little boy named Harlan, and Harlan was taught by his mother a special recipe down south in the United States on how to make chicken. When he grew up, he got a job as a short order cook in a small cafe. And he asked his boss if his boss would be interested in this chicken recipe. And his boss said, sure, throw it together, see what the people say. Turned out that everybody liked this special chicken recipe with all these secret herbs and spices. Well, for the rest of his career, right up till he was 65 years old, he either worked in little cafes or sometimes he owned a little cafe. When he was 65, he had a little cafe and he was making his chicken, and he had people coming from all around to eat his chicken. And the highways department built a highway past his little restaurant, his little chicken place, and put him out of business. They cut off the road so nobody could get to it. Well, at the same time, he received a Social Security check, his first Social Security check at the age of 65. And he became angry. He said, I'm 65 years old, but I'm not ready to give up on my dreams. What do I have to sell? And he realized the one thing that had kept him going all those years, the mainstay of his little career, was his mother's recipe of 17 or 18 herbs and spices. So he put them together in little bags, 1 bag per chicken, and he put his pots and pans in the back of his old car, And he started driving up and down the eastern seaboard, going from cafe to cafe to cafe, to ask them if they would pay him 5 cents a bag for his magical combination of herbs and spices. He called on more than 1,000 restaurants, sleeping in his car week after week, and finally he came across a little restaurant in Toronto that agreed to pay him 5 cents a bag for his herbs and spices. This is back in the 60s. And because of exchange controls, they had to give the money to the Red Cross. That was the beginning of the Kentucky Fried Chicken Empire. We began to sell this recipe more and more. People began to put it on their signs. A major corporation came along and said we could make a real business of this. So they embraced him. They built the franchise. They made him one of the best known people in the world. When he died some years later, he was worth more than $50 million because he never gave up on his dreams. So I don't know if you're 65 and broke and living in your car with pots and pans with no money, but wherever you are, you never give up on your dreams.
As strange as change can be, there were times when it was hard to imagine that my life would be what it is today. Especially the time when my son and I were living in that bathroom. Maybe you remember that scene in the movie. There was a highly polished sheet metal piece over a sink. It wasn't a mirror, but it served as a mirror. And I had to wash myself in that baby every day, wash my baby in that sink, and I had to ask myself some very predictable questions. What happened? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? But the most difficult question I had to get through was, how did I get here? And the answer was even more brutal. The answer was, I drove here. I had something to do with it. You can't change something until you own it. So if you're 50 plus and you're sitting out there and pointing fingers at other people, you can do that for a long time. But it's hard to look in the mirror and say, how did I get here? And have the answer be, I drove here. I had something to do with it. It's uncomfortable to admit that, well, I made some bad decisions. I made some investments I shouldn't have made. I had something to do with it. When that man sold me that house with no money down, I should have told him what he could do with that house. Huh? When I signed that adjustable rate mortgage, we all know these things only adjust upwards. No one's ever going to call you and say, guess what? You're going to pay less for your money in your house next year. Ain't going to happen. So the idea of I drove here is empowering, because the other side of it is, if I drove here, that means I can drive out of here. I have to own it. In that bathroom, I finally had to understand what my mama used to say to me, when she would say, boy, the cavalry is not coming. Ain't no backup. I was 28 years old when that part of my life happened. Change was coming fast. And you know what? Change is everywhere, all the time. Social change, technological change, and the most potent of all, personal change. The most urgent question today is not so much as what are my values and who are we? The urgent question in these times of constant change is, how exactly are you going to navigate these new realities? Put another way, what are you going to do?
A lot of you feel stuck because you're waiting for some kind of external force to either push you and pressure you to change and to be great and to be amazing, or you're waiting for somebody to give you permission. You're either sitting back because you need some sort of external motivation from somebody that's going to push you or praise you or pressure you in order to change, or some life circumstance, like maybe in your past you've experienced trauma or you faced something really scary and that was the thing that made you change. And then the second thing that people wait around for is permission. Look, those may or may not come in your life. If you are somebody that is sitting around waiting for some external force to come and do the work for you, that is such a losing bet, it's unbelievable. Maybe you'll get lucky, maybe somebody will come, but more than likely, no one is coming. The only kind of force that will truly create change in your life is you. The internal kind of force. I hate to say it, but for those of you that feel really, really stuck and you keep thinking that somebody's got to pick me, or somebody's going to discover me, or somebody's got to give me permission to write this book, it's ridiculous. This is external versus internal force. And what you have to figure out if you're stuck is, are you the kind of person that is guilty of needing, wanting, and waiting for external forces, people, an event, some outside force to kick you in the ass so that you'll finally do the stuff that you've been dreaming about doing? I want to tell you something. No one's coming. No one. The people in life that get what they want are the ones that aren't waiting for an external force to validate their dreams, to inspire them, to give them permission. It's the people that realize that success, that happiness, that control, it comes from the internal force. And what is the internal force? It's you. It's you. It's you being able to realize that no one's going to do the work for you. It's you realizing that you're never going to feel ready. In fact, even as you start working toward the things that you really want to do, you're definitely not going to feel ready. And you're going to feel outside your comfort zone. And that's normal. When you start to feel like you're stretching yourself and you're sticking your scrawny neck out there and you're taking some risks, that's amazing, because you're growing.
It was the night before we were putting drywall in our house. We were redoing a house, and he had put in all the plastic piping, you know, and I was going to test the joints. They're supposed to be glued together with this pipe glue, right? And I told him I had to test the joints, and he said, well, you don't have to test my joints, they never leak. And I thought, yeah, that's okay. How about if I test them? So I went up on the 3rd floor and filled the pipes with water, capping them in the basement like you're supposed to. And like half an hour later, I had 2 inches of water in the basement. There were 30 leaking joints. And that was the night before the drywallers were supposed to show up. So he wasn't particularly competent. That's the point of that story. But even more so, he had put a bunch of the plastic pipe outside where the drywall would be, so it would have been sticking through the wall. So I spent a frenetic night, you know, sawing through plastic pipe and re-gluing joints so that the drywallers could come in. What's the point? If you're going to be a plumber, man, be a good plumber, because otherwise all you do is go out there and cause trouble. We don't need people to cause more trouble. We need people to solve problems, you know. And so you can be a tradesman, and you can make a lot of money as a tradesperson. It's a bloody, reliable, honorable, forthright, productive way of making a living. And there is a hell of a lot of difference between a working man who knows what he's doing and one who doesn't, both in terms of skill and ethics, right? And you work with someone who knows what they're doing, it's a bloody pleasure. They tell you what they're going to do, they tell you how much it will cost, they go and do it, it works, and you pay them. Perfect. Everyone's happy. And that's what happens when you have genuine hierarchies of competence. And so you listen to these panderers of egalitarianism and equity, and they fail to recognize completely that there are differences in rank between people. It's not such a terrible thing, man. Maybe you wouldn't be a great lawyer. Like, it's certainly possible. Most people aren't. But that doesn't mean there isn't something you could be great at. There's lots of hierarchies to attempt to climb, and if you fail in one, go try in another. But the point is, you're still trying to aim for the top. And what the hell are you going to do if you don't try to aim for the top? You know, flap about uselessly and whine about your life? It's not helpful. It'll just make you miserable. You're not reliable to anyone. You can't help out in a crisis. It's like, so you tell young people, and this is another message for conservatives, like, I don't care what you're going to do, but go out there and make something of yourself, for God's sake. Be an honest person and work and get to the top of whatever it is that you want to get to the top of. You know, and stand up for yourself like a respectable human being, and be a bit of a light on the world instead of a blight, you know. And you can tell young people that, and they haven't been told that by anyone now. And so the young men are so hungry for that it's painful to watch. They're so relieved when someone finally comes up and says, hey, you know, you get your act together a bit, discipline yourself, see if you can learn to tell the truth, concentrate on something for a year or two, you could be a bloody world beater. They think, really? That's possible? Wow, that would be interesting. That might make life worth living. It's like, yeah, it might. So why don't you go do it? That's what the damn universities were supposed to be teaching people, and they've forgotten that. I went to Harvard a month and a half. I used to teach there, and I talked to a bunch of students, you know, and I told them, it's not easy to get into Harvard, you know. Like, you're a valedictorian if you're at Harvard. And not only are you a valedictorian, you're way better than most people at least 2 other things, or you don't get in. And so like I don't know what the acceptance rate is, like 5%, and believe me, not everybody applies, so it's a very selective school. And so why am I saying that? It's like, these are high quality kids. So I told them what I just told you. It's like, here you are at Harvard. It's like, get yourself educated, man. Read some books, learn to talk, learn to think, make yourself into something. Get the hell out there and make the world that put you here happy that you were put there in that great institution. You know, and they came up to me afterwards and said, God, I wish someone would have told us that when we were in our first year. It's like, Jesus, why didn't someone tell them that? For God's sake, it's supposed to be the greatest university in the world. Is it so difficult to figure that out?
The question is, what filters are you using to make decisions? Are you making decisions based on the financial rewards? Are you making decisions based on how easy the work will be? I mean, I remember in college, you know, they would give you this book where all the students would rate the classes, and they would rate things like how easy the class was and how, you know, how much they liked the professor. And, you know, the first year I picked all my classes based on workload, and I picked everything a low workload, you know, and pretty bored, didn't work very hard, which was fine, but nothing was dynamic and nothing really excited me. And I, thank goodness, learned that. And so the second year, I picked all my classes by professor rating, regardless of the workload. So every class I had these dynamic, amazing, incredible human beings passing on their knowledge, and you were excited to work hard for them, you know? And so again, the question is, what are the filters we're using? And so if you're only chasing the mighty dollar, then you will have jobs that'll pay you a little more than the last, but are you enjoying yourself? And I talked to a guy recently who was he's in bad shape. Like, he really hates his life, and he's really depressed, and he doesn't know what to do. And so we were going through all his old jobs, you know, and I said, give me a job that you've loved. And he hadn't. Every single job he's chosen out of college, he picked because of the money. And if something offered him more somewhere else, he took it, you know, regardless. And the amazing thing is he plateaued, because if you're only chasing the result, if you're only chasing the thing that makes it easy, right? Then eventually you will get bored, or they'll get bored of you, right? And you plateau. In other words, chasing the almighty dollar, if that's your only thing, it eventually flattens out. Whereas if you're chasing the thing that excites you, the human beings to be around, the work that excites you, the stuff that, you can get passionate about, you know? The irony is you'll actually make way, way more, right? Because you're excited, and they appreciate your excitement, and they reward your excitement, and you're better at your work because you want to work harder and all of that stuff. You don't have to strain to work harder. So decision making is simply a matter of filters, you know? And so I've made decisions in my life that I would rather be happy than right. I'd rather do good than get rich. And so the decisions I make put me in positions where when I leave any engagement, when I leave any meeting, I feel that I've contributed, right? Rare are the times anymore where you walk away going, just think of the money, just think of the money, think of the money, you know? Because it doesn't feel nice. And the experience I have, I don't enjoy traveling to them, and I don't enjoy traveling home. Where if I have an amazing experience, I am looking forward to getting there, and I'm excited when I leave. Yeah. You know, so it's just decision making is just a matter of what filters you use, and if you're good about keeping those filters up and clear, then make your decisions. I don't judge anybody by how if they choose to use different filters. These are just the filters I choose to live my life. You know, not right or wrong, just those are my decisions. You know, that's my filter.
You're lost, and the problem with being lost is when you're lost, you don't know where to go, and the problem with not knowing where to go is there's a million places that you could go, and a million places is too many places for you to go without dying. So being lost is not good. So you need to know where you are. And you can kind of tell if you don't know where you are. It's quite straightforward. If you are haunted by reveries of the past, for events that are older than approximately 18 months, if they continue to come up in your mind over and over, in your dreams over and over, you haven't extracted the world out from your past experiences. The potential is still trapped in the past. And to confront the potential means to confront the dragon of the past. And of course, that's terrifying, and it can seriously be terrifying. So you're navigating, you're a navigator, you're a sailor on an ocean, man. That's what you are. You're a mobile creature. You're going from point A to point B all the time. You're not sitting there glued to a rock like some brainless, sea creature. There's a funny little creature called a hydra, very simple little creature. In its juvenile stage, it has a brain because it swims around, but then when it turns into an adult, it latches itself to a rock and promptly digests its brain. Because if you're just sitting on a rock and you're not moving, you don't need a brain. But that's not our issue, right? We're zipping around in the world, and so we're navigating agents. And so to navigate, there's two things you need to know. And the first is, where the hell are you? Exactly, precisely, right? Razor sharp. What's good about you and what's bad about you? By your own reckoning. You don't have to, you can ask other people, but this is a game you play yourself. It's like, as far as I'm concerned, I'm taking stock. What is it that's okay about me and what needs some work? And you got to watch to not be too self-critical when you're doing that too, because that can just be another kind of flaw.